Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Redgate's Community Circle. I'm Kathy Kellenberger. I'm teaching an Introduction to Reporting Services class. We also have Kendra Little teaching Beginning T-SQL, Grant Fritchie teaching Query Tuning, and Steve Jones teaching Power BI and DAX. We also have something new coming up. Grant Fritchie is going to lead a new event, a weekly event called Community Circle Cloud Conversation Club. So be sure to go out to the Redgate Community Circle and check that out. I know that recordings should be available if you can't make it to the live sessions. And there'll be several community experts and leaders talking about cloud-based data management. So be sure to check it out. This is week 6 of the Introduction to SQL Server Reporting Services. And this week we're going to talk about visualizations. So there's one thing I really need to bring up, and that's visualizations are not quite as important anymore as they used to be for reporting services. And the reason for that is that a lot of companies are using things like Power BI or Tableau for their dashboards. So some places, not everywhere, but some places are using reporting services for where you have to have a lot of data displayed in a tabular manner and leaving those dashboards to other tools that have some extra functionality that reporting services doesn't have. You may remember the first week I talked about reporting services being pixel perfect. And what that really means is you have to define everything up front. There's no ad hoc clicking, to drill down into things like with a tool like Power BI. You can do those things in reporting services, but those have to be figured out up front, and you have to program that in up front. Another thing I'll have to say is this is really not the area that I have the most experience in. I always say that I can get you your data, but I may not make it pretty. So I'm going to show you the basics of this, and I know there's probably people out there that have some artistic talent that can make things look much better and can probably dig deeper into these features that I'm going to do today. Of course, this is an introductory course, so we're not going to drill down deep really into any aspect of it. And we have a number of resources like always. We have the live class through Zoom, like you're watching today. You can check out the recordings either on YouTube Redgate Community Circle playlist or on the Redgate University on the Redgate Hub. I will put all the files except for the recordings out on GitHub. And if you have any questions or like to have a discussion about any of the things that you've learned, you can go to this Redgate forum. And also there is an article. This article was written, I believe, around 2014. I do think everything is still up to date as far as the information, but so you might use that as a resource. I have one thing that is a housekeeping item from last week. While I was doing the class, I thought about sorting with the parameter instead of the little arrows, the little properties that you can set up. And I found an interesting question out on Stack Overflow. One thing that was really interesting is a couple of people answered the question. Not everybody was correct. One incorrect answer was to add the parameter to the order by clause of the T-SQL statement, and that doesn't work. You just get an error. However, this is an expression you can use. You have to put it in the sort property of the group or the table. And for example, let's say we have in our data set, we have a field line number, and we also have a field planned start date. And the parameter is going to have line number and plan start date as the choices. So what you do is you have this if statement. So if the parameter is line number, then sort by fields line number value. Otherwise, sort by fields plan start date value. So that did work, and it seems like I had found something in the past that was even more complex than this. I'm sure there is something out there, but this seemed like a really brilliant solution. So if this is something you would like to do, you can go ahead and do it. Notice this is just a true false. Either this is true, or either the line number one is true, or the plan start date is true, one or the other. So if you have more choices than that, you'll have to use something different, like maybe a switch, or you can also use nested ifs. If you can say, if line number is true, if it's line number, you can have this value, and then you could put another IIF statement here in the false part. That would work as well. So we're going to talk about several controls today. So far during the class, we've worked only with 3 types of controls: the text box, the table, and the matrix. That's all we've worked with so far. So today we're going to look at a bunch of other controls that have to do with the visual aspects of reports. We're going to start with the image control. The image control must be linked to some images, obviously, and you can have 3 different ways to do this. Either the image can be embedded in the report, you can link to an image that's out on the web or in your intranet, or you can also pull images from a database. So in order to display these, especially if it's from the database, we're going to have repeating data coming back, we can add that image control to a list control that's sort of like a table. It's kind of like a pared down table, or to a regular table. So that's what I'm going to show you next, how to work with the image control. And I have our project already open here, and I have a couple of reports: product list base and sales chart base. I'm going to make a copy of this one, copy, and paste, and then I'll go ahead and change the name of it. And then double click to open it. So what I have here is a data set that has a list of products, and I'm going to pop over to Management Studio, and this is the query. And notice that this large photo column is binary. So that's one way you can work with images in SQL Server. You can either store them in a binary column, or you can also use the file system. There's a feature, seems like it's called file store, where you can have a folder that's associated with the database that gets backed up with the database, and then you just have to have a link to each image. Or you could store links, HTML type links, or to a share, or whatever you want to do. But this is one way. You store the actual binary in the database itself. So we're going to come back here. First thing I want to show you is how to display a static image. So notice that there's an images folder in the report data, and I can add a collection of images here. So I'm going to right click and add an image, and there is an image, and now I've got it added to my collection. So to display this, I'm going to right click, insert, and I'm going into the header of the report, and notice that I can add a text box, line, rectangle, or image. So these are 4 controls that don't have to be hooked up to a data set. Okay, text box can or may or may not, but I'm going to click the image, and then the properties come up. And I have to choose the source, embedded, external, or database. So for this one, I'm going to choose embedded, and I get a list of the items that are in my images collection. So I'll go ahead and choose that. And if I want, I can add a tooltip. I'm going to call it Redgate logo. Okay, and click OK. Notice there's quite a few other properties that you can work with as well. I'm going to make it a little bit bigger. This isn't a great one for the logo on a report because there's a lot of white space, but it still works. And if I preview the report, if I hover over with the mouse, I should see let me try that again. There's that the tooltip that I mentioned. Another thing that you can do is add lines to a report. And those might be nice things for decorating your logo or your header on all the reports. And actually next week, I'm going to talk about using templates. So for example, let's say you have a directive that all of the reports, the headings should all be the same. And I'll show you how to do that next week. So let's go ahead and grab a line. Let's straighten it out and drag it over and make it longer. So the line doesn't have any right-click property dialog. You have to go over to the property window, and there's very few properties, mostly, the size, location, and color. I'm going to go ahead and change it to red, and I'm going to make it a little bit wider, 5 point, and then I'm going to copy and paste and create a second line, and I'll make this one a little bit longer, and then do that again and make this one a little bit longer. So you might have, something that your company says, we want all the reports to have this look and feel. Okay, so you can do that with visual controls. So I showed you how to add an image with a static image saved in the report, but I can also pull from a database. So I'm going to show you how to do that next. I'm going to right click into the report body and insert a list control. And like I said, this is kind of like a really pared down table. Notice that it just has a big cell, one big cell. You could add others if you want, but if you add too much to it, you may as well start with the table. So the idea here is that I can add things inside this. You can also do that with a regular table cells, but typically you're not going to. Typically you're going to just have a value, a placeholder, whatever, where this is really meant for adding items. So I'm going to add a text box and make that product ID. Add another text box and make this name. Then I can, move these around to make it look a little neater. And I'm going to make this cell bigger and add the image control. And just like before, the image properties pop up. And in this case, I'm going to use a database image. And you might even want to use a database image for your logo at the top. I know I used to work at a firm where we had lots of mergers and our name and logo would change from time to time. I would hate to have to go back and modify 1,000 reports for a certain date that the merger was announced. So maybe storing things like that in a database is not a bad idea. And that's something I'm going to talk about next week whenever we talk about deploying some little tips like that. So we're going to use the large photo. You have to tell it what type of file. And I just see bitmap, JPEG, GIF or GIF, however you decide to pronounce it, PNG and XPNG. I happen to know this one is a JPEG, so I'll click OK. I'm going to make this little image control bigger. And let's run the report to see how it looks. Notice that we have some that have some bicycles displayed, you know, and it's changing depending on the color of the bicycle and the look of the bicycle. But notice there's also some that say no image available. When I first learned how to do this years ago, I actually thought that this was a feature of reporting services, but it really isn't. There is an image that this is the actual image, no image available, that is stored in the database. So that's just a feature of AdventureWorks, not reporting services per se. Well, I'm going to go ahead and jump back over to the slides and talk about charts and graphs. Now, this is probably what you were thinking of when I first mentioned what we were going to be talking about. So this is your typical things to show data, like change over time or, you know, whatever it is. So there's the good thing about these is that they are highly customizable. The bad thing about these is that they are highly customizable. And the reason I say that is that I feel like there's a learning curve. And there's so many properties, and sometimes it's hard to find exactly what you're looking for. And for somebody like me, I don't really work with these that often, so sometimes I stumble around a little bit trying to find the right property. Hopefully I don't do that too much today, but you never know. Here's an example of a graph where we're looking at one particular year, 2012, and we're looking at all the territories and their sales over time. Notice that we have formatting of the y-axis and we're showing sales in thousands. So that's just some really, really basic formatting. But you can go much deeper than that. Another type, and these are typically standalone. It might be at the top of the report or whatever. And you can enable some click-through. We could have a click-through action where you click on one of these dots and it takes you to the details. However, that has to be set up ahead of time. It doesn't happen automatically. The other type that you might see as a standalone is a gauge. So a gauge is going to be something like we have a sales target and where did we land? So if we land you know, in the red, that's really bad. If we land in the yellow, it's okay, but not great. But if we land in the green, well, that's wonderful. And typically these look like thermometers. However, there are lots of different styles from which to choose. So let's go ahead and pop back over to the demo and we'll see if we can get all of these right. I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing. Copy and paste. And this one has several data sets, including a year data set, and I have given it the default value of 2012. So it is going to be filtered automatically by 2012, just so I don't have to keep choosing a year as I run it. So the first thing I'm going to do, and I'm going to use the sales by territory and year, and notice that it is using the year parameter. I'm going to use that query. I'm going to right click and insert a chart. And you can see I've got several to choose from. If you click on the different types over on the left, it just highlights an area. So it looks like there's probably about 2 or 3 dozen, something like that. I'm going to just choose the basic one. Notice that there's quite a few that have 3 dimensions to them. You got to be really careful when you do that, because sometimes those can kind of distort the value, how the values look. You're really better off with flat, simpler the better. And you can see there's quite a few different types. I'm just going to choose the basic one and click OK. And when I do, I am going to expand it. And right now it's not hooked up to any data, and it looks kind of plain, but you can see that you can have different series. I could compare last year's sales to the year before sales, something like that. The key to get started with these is by clicking over on the right, and this chart data dialog pops up. And in this case, and pretty much in all of these, I'm going to be looking at total sales. Now, I have a number of different data sets. So in this case, I know I need the sales by territory and year. So I'm going to grab that. Okay. And notice that at least at this point, we only have one series that we're looking at. And that's really all I'm going to do with this simple one. So what is a series? How do I determine that? That's a category group. So I am going to, instead of using details, I am going to choose territory name. All right, so now I have at least enough information that I can run this and get back some data. Actually, some meaningful data. So one thing you might notice right up front is that I'm not seeing all of the territory names like every other one. So that's something we need to fix. The sales, the dollars over here look not formatted, so that's something else. We don't really have a good chart title, and we might even want to play with some of the fonts, something like that. So you can really customize the heck out of these. I'm going to just stick with the basics. So the first thing is this x-axis. I really don't like how it's showing every other item. So if I right-click on it, I can get the horizontal axis properties. And to fix that every other thing, go to the interval property and change that to 1. Okay, and I'm going to click OK and click Preview. And now you can see all of them there. I still might, and if I can find it, I know there's a property that I can change. Is it on labels? Yeah, so down here on the labels property, disable auto fit, and I'm going to change it to 45 degrees. That will make them kind of at an angle. It might look a little better. We can do things like increase the font size, change the color of it, whatever you want to do here. Let me just click OK, and I think I'm going to just make this thing a little bit bigger. I don't really need this total sales legend. That's going to come in really handy if I have multiple series, which I don't. So I'm just going to delete that. I'm going to go to the chart title. Now I could hard code something there, but it might make more sense to go to the title properties and add an expression, something like sales for, I'm going to go to the parameter, sales for a particular year. Okay. The other thing I might do is move the position of the title. I'm going to move it to the middle. Of course, I can change the font. Let's make it 14. Let's make it let's start green, whatever we want to do. It's a lot you can do there. So another thing I might want to do is enable tooltips on these series properties. So if I right click and go to series properties, I can add a tooltip, and tooltips are just really, really handy with these, as well as actions. You know, if you want to drill down, again, this is going to be just like drilling down to a sub-report that you learned a couple of weeks ago. If I go to series data, I am going to go to the tooltip, and I'm going to grab a common function called, let's see, it's under text, format currency. I'm going to go to the fields, total sales, make it a comma, 0, and that will format it as money for me. Not formatted, but the tooltip will be formatted. So I'm going to preview and see how far we've got, how much we've got. So it's looking better. And you can see the dollar amount. I still haven't done anything over with the y-axis, the vertical axis. I can right click, and I'm going to go ahead and show an axis title. And I'm going to go to the vertical axis property and go to the number page and go to currency, get rid of the decimal points, use a thousand separator, and also show values in thousands. This is really handy if the numbers are really large numbers. Probably doesn't make quite as much of a difference here, but we're going to go ahead and do it just to show you how it can be done. And then the axis title, when I click that, I'm going to say sales in thousands, because I really need to let the end user understand what's going on with those numbers. So now when I preview, I've got my sales in thousands, I've got the formatting, so I've got everything that I want for this report. Again, you could do click and drill down to another report, anything like that. One more thing I might want to try. Maybe I would like to see, instead of sorting alphabetically, maybe it would be cool to sort by the sales amount. So if I go back over to the chart data properties and go to the category groups and go to the category group properties and go to the sorting tab, notice that it's sort by territory name, it's grouped by territory name, and sort by territory name. So what I would like to do is sort by total sales. The problem is that it's going to look at the detailed data, so it's just going to grab the value of the very first item. So what I need to do is click the FX button and add in the sum function. Click OK and click OK, and then preview it, and you can see that it starts with the low and goes to the highest, southwest, or I could do that descending, whatever I would like to do there. If I choose a different year and click View Report, you can see things changed a bit. So that's not all I'm going to do on that one. I'm going to add another one, Insert Chart, and this time I'm going to choose a line chart with markers and click OK. Again, I'm going to have to make it larger, and this time I am going to use a series of more than just one thing going across. And let me just double check my notes really quick. So this one, I believe I'm going to choose the same one. It has order month in it. I'm going to choose total sales. And for the category, I'm going to choose order month. Okay. And for the series, I'm going to choose territory name. So I'm going to get one line going across for each territory. And the line is going to change based on order month. So I can do something like, well, I can go here and go to the horizontal properties and change the label, because one thing, let's see. Well, let's take a look at it first. I think it's going to have numbers going across, and I might want to see, so it's got 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. You know, we really don't want to see that. I'd really like to see the month names going across. So I'm going to go to category group properties, and notice that it is grouped on order month and the label is order month. So what I'm going to do is click the FX button and go to the common functions. I'm going to put my cursor there, go to date and time, and there's a month name function. So I'm going to use that month name function and click OK and click OK. So now when I take a look at it, I've got my line for each one, and I've also got the months. However, I still get that every other thing going. So I've got to go into the horizontal axis properties and change this interval to 1. And take a look at it again. And now you can see that it's doing that diagonal, or the vertical thing. So I might want to go in and go back to those properties and go to the labels and come down to this disable auto fit and do that 45-degree again. Whatever you want to do. I can also come in here and add on the series properties, I can add a tooltip again. I might want to add a tooltip that gives me the territory name and the amount, and I want to format that. So I'm going to go to text, format currency, go back to fields and choose, I'm going to choose sum of total sales. And hopefully I've got that all right. I'm going to go ahead and run it. And when I mouse over, I can see which territory belongs to, as well as the value. Again, you could enable click-through. You can do just about anything here. I'm going to go ahead and move on to another really cool type of chart. Insert chart, this tree map. And I'm going to make it bigger. And the tree map, again, we're going to use the sum of total sales. We're going to do category, territory name. And if I leave it like this, every territory will be the same color. But if I go ahead and add territory name to series, I will get different colors. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and run this. And you can see you get different colors and different sizes. However, I'm seeing the territory name in the 2 spots. Okay, and some of them I don't see any. Again, you can add tooltips, but if I right click and I'm not sure exactly why, but click that show data labels, it will change to where I'm seeing the number instead. And of course I can then go in and format that. I can add tooltips, drill down, whatever I'd like to do. Just thought that was really a cool chart. Again, there's a lot of different types of charts you can add. So the next thing I want to add is this gauge. Gauges always throw me a little bit. I'm going to try to get it right here. And again, you've got different types. I'm just going to choose just this ordinary looking thermometer here. And the way this works, let's just go to the properties, the gauge panel. each range by default is a third of the data, 0 to 33 up to 100. So we're going to have to modify all of those. The first thing is we need to tell it where it's getting the data for the pointer. So we're going to go to a different data set this time, sales quota. And this is just some made up data. So we're going to say we want the pointer to be the actual sales. And then I'm going to configure each of these different ranges for a range based on the target. So I'm going to right click, go to gauge panel, and the very bottom one is range 1. So I want to start my range at 0, but I would like to end it based on the target value. So we're going to go fields, target times 0.75. And then I'm going to just copy this to make this a little bit easier for me. Okay, so it's 0 to up to 75% of the target. I'm going to right click again. This time I'm going to go to number 2. I'm going to start this one at 75. And I'm going to go up to 95. And then finally the third one, which is, let's see, whoops. The third one is at the top. And in this case, I'm going to start with 0.95. And I'm going to go up to 1.25 because they might have actually exceeded the goal. Other thing I've got to do is tell it how big the whole gauge is going to be. Scale properties. So the scale is not going to go from 0 to 100. The scale is going to go to 1.25 times the target value. Okay. And there was one other thing. On the layout, I'm not sure if I can find it. There's a thing that I like to turn off at the very top. I'm not sure exactly where it is, but we'll just go ahead with that. And there's a way to turn off that very top number. So notice I have my first range, my second range, and finally the third range. And they did okay. So that's it for the regular charts, graphs, and gauges. Now let's jump back over to the slides for the next type of visualization. Let's see. So far I've shown you standalone images, standalone charts, graphs, and gauges. You can also add visuals to table cells. They call this, I can't think of the name, I'm calling it KPI for Key Performance Indicator. They've got another name, which I should have put here, which I'll show you once I get to the demo. So based on a value in the table, you can show a different icon and different colors. It's good to show different icons because some people are colorblind. You can also add sparklines or charts to cells as well. So this data here is how the sales looked over the year. Again, you can add actions, you can add tooltips. The difference here is these are just kind of smaller, much less properties than your typical charts and gauges. So let's take a look at how to do that. What I think I'm going to do is just go ahead and make a new copy. Let's see, which one did I do? Let's make sure I got the right one. I just use this one here. And I am going to insert a table. I'm going to do something a little bit goofy with this. It just depends on what you want to do. I want to have the sparkline and the KPIs at the grouping level, and I really don't care about the detail. So I'm going to go ahead and add in sales by month sales. And then I'm going to add a grouping level, order year, and then I'm going to delete out the detail. So all I'm showing here, I'm going to say yes, delete the row and associated groups. And now I'm only working with a grouping level, not the detail. I'm not showing the detail. I'm going to add total sales back in. And since it's on a grouping level, it automatically summed, which is what I want. And I'm going to, well, I don't have to really expand that one too much. I am going to right click and insert, and you really can insert anything you want into a cell, but these little indicator, key performance indicator, and sparkline and data bar are made just for this purpose. So I'm going to click indicator, and this pops up, and I need to tell it what kind I want. I would stay away from the stoplight types because someone who's colorblind is not going to understand what's what. I'm just going to choose the default here. And just like your big charts and gauges and graphs, if you click here, you get this gauge data. And this is only, again, this is much simpler than the standalone type. I'm going to go here and choose sales. Now, if I right click and go to the, this is a gauge, a real simple gauge, go to the gauge panel properties. Let's see. Let's go to the indicator properties. You can go to values and states, and notice that you can measure, you can control this by either percentage or numeric, and you can use an expression to do that. If I choose percentage, it's by default, it's like divided up into thirds, which is fine. And I can even add additional ones. I can change the colors, whatever I'd like to do here. I'm just going to leave it at the default and preview the report. I'm getting this modified outside the environment. I'm going to click reload all again and run it again. I probably just didn't save something. And you can see that it shows anything in the lower 1/3 as red and anything in the higher 1/3 is green. You can modify that however you wish. I'm going to go ahead and add a sparkline. And again, you've got a lot of different choices here. Even those box whisker, I call it a candlestick. I think that's those box whisker plots if you're into data science. And let's go with a line with markers. And I'm going to have to make this a little bit wider. So basically, it's going to have one spot per month. Click it here, and this time you do have a little bit extra because it is representing not only the value, but also the category moving across. You don't want to add too much because it is going in a small space. Sum of sales for the values, and for category, order month. Go ahead and preview that. And again, you can add tooltips, click the line, go to the series properties, And here I can add a tooltip. So I can go here. I'm going to say, double click, say order month, and let's make that month name. And format currency. Let's make that sum sales. Okay, and click OK. And run it again. And now when I mouse over, I can see exactly what the value means, okay, for that particular year. Let's go ahead and go back to the slides, and I have one more type of visual to show you, and that's the maps. This is really, really cool, especially if you have some experience in geographic type data, geospatial data. You can do all kinds of things. I'm going to show you the very simplest example, but you could use bring in Bing Maps. You could have custom maps, like for example, a warehouse layout. You could do all kinds of things. This can get very, very complex real quick, so I'm going to stick with the simplest example. I'm going to bring up my SAM report here. I'm going to right click, insert a map. And the first thing you've got to do is tell it what type of background you're going to use. You could use a query that returns spatial data, longitude and latitude, geography, geometry data types. You can use an ESRI file, or you can use installed maps. I'm not sure if you can add additional maps. It's possible, but you've got USA plus other, that's just by states. So it's got USA. I'm not really sure if you could add additional maps to that. In the back of my mind, I think you can. I'm going to choose USA by state. That looks like that. And on the next screen, you can kind of move things around and change. It doesn't look like it's changing that much. Let's go with that. There we go. You know, change it. You can add a Bing layer if you want. I'm going to go ahead and click next. And here I can choose either a basic map that uses one color in different shades. I'm going to choose the color analytic map, so I can use my red, green, and yellow. You can also choose a bubble map, which makes bubbles depending on the size of the value. This is probably the simplest one, I think. I'm going to click next. And I have to choose a data set that's already in the report, which is one US sales. That's what I would like to add. I'm going to click next. And this one might seem a little bit confusing when you first look at it, but basically this is the spatial data set fields associated with the map that I chose. And here's my data. I've got the state, let's see. Oh, here's my analytical data. Here's my spatial data that is part of my map, this middle one, and the bottom one is my data. I've got sales and I've got the state name. So I've got to match those up. So what I do is click this, and that makes this one light up. And then I choose something from here, which is going to make one of these bottom ones light up. Okay, so if I see that that data looks the same, I'm good to go. This is probably the trickiest part of this. I'll click next. I need to choose what I want to visualize. What will these colors be based on? And there is my sum of sales. And by default, it's green for the worst and red for the best. I'm going to flip that around since we're talking about sales, so that red is the lowest and green is the highest. I'll click finish, and there's my map. So I'm going to go ahead and run this. I want to show you one thing. So there's the sales. Again, you can do click through, modify this, add multiple layers. You can do a lot. However, if I come up here and choose a different year, I don't think the data is going to change. And there's a reason for that. If I go back and look at this data set, notice that there is a hard-coded year here. So the reason for this is that in order to run that wizard, you can't have a parameter that doesn't have a value. So you have one or two things you can do. You can either set this declare statement up front like you would in SQL Server, like in Management Studio or ADS, and provide a value, or leave the parameter out until later. One of those two things. So to really make this report work correctly, I'm going to go in here and remove that top line, and now it will respect that parameter. I'm going to go ahead and run the report again. And this is 2012 data. If I go to 2013, hopefully it will look different. Looks a little different. And 2014, again, looks a little different. So that is another thing to keep in mind. Well, that's all I have to show you today. I feel like I've just scratched the surface of what you can do here, but then on the other hand, Power BI is just kind of taken over with things like this. There is another type of report called mobile report that came out a few years ago, might be 2016, I'm not really sure, where you can create some little dashboards in reporting services that can show up on phones or iPads. I'm going to go ahead and show you those next week. I'm not going to spend a ton of time. They are actually easier to work with than these the traditional charts and graphs. So next week, the main thing we're going to talk about is deploying reports. There's going to be quite a bit to cover, so make sure you don't miss it. See you then.